I never imagined the most painful words of my life would come from my own daughter, one day before her wedding, when she told me I wasn't part of her real family. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so you don't miss our daily stories. Leave a like and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Michael Turner. I'm 62, and for decades I believed I had raised the perfect daughter. Emily was always my little princess, especially after we lost her mother Rose 3 years ago to complications from diabetes. Rose Bennett had been the love of my life, and when she died, Emily became the only thing I had left in this world. I've worked my whole life as a carpenter, these rough hands building furniture and fixing homes so my family could live with dignity. We weren't rich, but we never lacked anything. Emily studied at good schools, had her teenage whims, and she was always treated like the princess she was to me. Everything changed when Emily turned 23 and met Jason Montgomery at a college party. This young man came from a very wealthy New York family. His father, Andrew Montgomery, owned several import businesses, and his mother, Patricia Hart Montgomery, was the kind of woman who flashed her jewelry at every social event. From the first day Emily told me about him, I noticed something different in her eyes, some kind of fascination I had never seen before. At first I thought it was normal, a first serious love and all that, but little by little my Emily started to change. Her visits home became less frequent. When she did come by, she wasn't the affectionate girl who used to sit with me to watch TV or help me in the shop on Sundays. Now she showed up in expensive clothes, talked differently, used words I had to look up in the dictionary. "Dad, you don't understand how the world works now," she'd say when I asked about her new friends. "Things have changed. You have to adapt to certain social circles." Rose had warned me about this before she died. "Mike," she told me one afternoon while I cared for her at the hospital, "our Emily is growing up, and the world out there can be cruel to people like us. Promise me you'll always love her no matter what happens, but never let her lose respect for you." Those words echoed in my mind every time Emily came home talking about the Montgomerys like they were American royalty. She told me about their homes, their trips, their business connections, and every time she did, I felt smaller in her eyes. The final shift came when Emily and Jason got engaged after 2 years of dating. It was January 2023 when she gave me the news, but something in the way she said it made me feel like I was more of an obligation than a celebration. "Dad, Jason and I are getting married," she said while staring at her phone without even looking up at me. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I answered, trying to hug her, but she subtly stepped away. "Yeah, well, it's going to be a big wedding. The Montgomerys know a lot of important people." That sentence hurt more than I could express in that moment. The following months felt like watching my own daughter fade away in front of me. Emily was no longer the person I had raised for 26 years. Every conversation centered on wedding plans, but I felt like an outsider watching a stranger's life. "The Montgomerys booked the ballroom at the Plaza Hotel," she'd say, while scrolling through endless lists on her laptop. "Patricia says it'll be the wedding of the year in New York City. There'll be business leaders, politicians, very influential people." I nodded and smiled, but inside, something was breaking. Each time she mentioned Patricia or Andrew as if they were her real parents, I felt a knife in my chest. This woman who had called me daddy all through her childhood now talked about me like I was some distant relative. Her visits got even rarer. Emily said she was busy with fittings, tastings, flowers, all of it. I tried to be involved, asked if I could help with anything, but I always got the same answer. "Don't worry, Dad. We've got it all handled." One Saturday in March 2024, I decided to surprise her at her apartment. I brought some shelves I'd built just for her, thinking she might like them in her new place with Jason. When I arrived, I found Emily, Jason, and Patricia Hart Montgomery at the dining table, surrounded by catalogs and sample swatches. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Emily asked, clearly uncomfortable with my unexpected visit. I wanted to bring you these shelves I made for you too, I said, carrying the pieces of wood I'd sanded for weeks. Patricia looked me up and down with that practiced social smile I'd seen at events. How rustic, she said, and I could hear the disdain in her voice. Jason didn't even stand to greet me. Thanks, Michael, but we already ordered all the furniture from an Italian designer. These don't match the style we're going for. Emily said nothing, absolutely nothing in my defense. She just sat there, embarrassed by her own father. That night I drove home with the shelves in the truck, feeling lonelier than ever since Rose died. I sat in our old armchair and looked at the family photos on the wall. There was Emily at 5, riding on my shoulders at a town fair. At 10, proudly showing me her grades. At 15, hugging me after her high school ceremony. When exactly did I lose my daughter? The last months before the wedding were silent torment. Emily hardly called, and when she did, our chats were mechanical, as if she were just checking a box. I kept working in my shop, but every piece of furniture reminded me of those rejected shelves and the shame in my daughter's eyes. April 2024 came, and the wedding invitations started circulating among relatives and friends. I waited for mine with hope, thinking maybe at that special moment Emily would remember who had always been by her side. But the days went by and nothing showed up in my mailbox. I decided to ask her directly during one of her rare calls. Emily, honey, when are you going to give me the wedding details? It's coming up and I need to get my suit ready. There was an awkward silence on the line. Dad, about that. We need to talk. My heart sped up. Talk about what? It's just, the wedding is going to be very elegant, very formal. The Montgomerys have certain standards and, Emily, I'm your father. What standards could matter more than that? It's not that simple, Dad. Patricia says the guest list has to be very selective, only people who fit the atmosphere we want. Those words hit me like a hammer. You're telling me I don't fit at my own daughter's wedding. Don't say it like that, Dad. It's just that your job, your clothes, the way you speak, it doesn't match what we've planned. In that moment, I knew I had lost Emily for good. The confirmation came on Friday afternoon, May 10th, 2024, exactly one day before the ceremony. Emily showed up at my door unannounced, something she hadn't done in months. For a second, my heart filled with hope, thinking she'd come to apologize, to invite me personally to her wedding, to remember I was her dad. But when I saw her cold, distant face, I knew she'd come to bury our relationship for good. Dad, I came to make things clear once and for all, she said, standing in the doorway, not even stepping into the home where she'd grown up. Come in, honey. Sit down. Want a coffee? I offered, trying to keep things normal even with the lump in my throat. No, I don't have time. Tomorrow's my wedding and there's a lot to supervise. She stayed by the door as if my house could contaminate her. I wanted to explain why you didn't get an invitation. Those words fell on me like a slab of concrete. Emily, I'm your father. I don't need an invitation to be there on the most important day of your life. That's exactly what you don't understand, she replied with a hardness I'd never heard in her voice. I decided to invite only my real family, the people who truly matter in my new life. Your real family, I repeated, my mouth going dry. Who is your real family if not me? The Montgomerys, of course. Andrew, Patricia, Jason's uncles, his cousins, cultured, educated people who understand the world I live in now. Every word felt like a slap. You, Dad, are too simple for this kind of event. You don't fit the level we want to project. I stood there, looking at the woman I had raised with my own hands, protected for 26 years. Emily, I changed your diapers when you were a baby. I took you to the hospital every time you got sick. I worked double shifts to pay for your college. How can you tell me I'm not your real family? That was before, Dad. Now I have other priorities, other responsibilities. The Montgomerys are my future. She adjusted her purse on her shoulder, the gesture she used when she wanted to end an uncomfortable conversation. I hope you understand, and please don't cause a scene by showing up where you weren't invited. She left my house without even saying goodbye, without a hug, without a kiss on the cheek. She just left me there, standing in the doorway, watching her drive off in the new car the Montgomerys had given her as an engagement present. That night was the longest of my life. I sat on the couch where Rose and I used to plan Emily's future, surrounded by photos that now felt like they were mocking me. There was Emily at 8, hugging me after I taught her to ride a bike. At 12, crying in my arms when some kids at school made fun of her. At 18, glowing as I helped her move into her first apartment for college. When had I failed as a father? When exactly had I stopped being enough for the girl who had been my whole world? I took out the suit I'd had tailored, especially for her wedding, the only formal suit I owned, the same one I'd worn at my own wedding to Rose 28 years earlier. I hung it on the closet door and looked at it for hours, wondering if I was really so embarrassing that my own daughter was ashamed of me. Saturday, May 11th, dawned sunny and beautiful, one of those perfect days made for celebrations. From my window I could see neighbors getting ready for their weekend plans, normal families living normal lives without daughters who had disowned them. I couldn't help it. At 4 p.m, I put on my best shirt and drove to the Plaza Hotel. I didn't plan to go in or make trouble. I just wanted to see my little girl from a distance on her wedding day, even if she'd decided I didn't deserve to be present. I stood across the street, tucked behind a column, watching guests arrive in luxury cars. I recognized a few distant relatives who had also been excluded, but unlike me, they hadn't dared to come anywhere near. When Emily stepped out of the limousine, she looked radiant in her designer wedding dress. For a moment she paused at the hotel entrance and glanced toward where I was hiding. Our eyes met for a second, and I swear I saw a flicker of doubt in her look, but she immediately turned away and walked inside on the arm of Andrew Montgomery, who had the honor of giving her away at the altar, the place that rightfully belonged to me. That image burned into my mind forever, my daughter being given in marriage by a stranger, while her real father watched from the shadows like an intruder. I went home with a broken heart, but also with something else, total clarity about what I had to do. Sunday, May 12th, 2024, I woke up with a strange feeling. For the first time in years, I didn't have to wonder when Emily would call or visit. I didn't have to expect anything from her anymore, because she made it clear I wasn't part of her new life. I got up early and went straight to my shop. There, among the smell of wood and varnish that had been my refuge for decades, I made the hardest decision of my life. I was going to move forward without Emily, just as she had moved forward without me. The first thing I did was take down all the photos of Emily hanging on the shop walls. I didn't throw them away. That would have been cruel even for my wounded heart. But I put them in a box along with all the gifts I'd made for her over the years and which she'd left behind in her old room. "Rose," I murmured as I sorted through the memories. "Our little girl doesn't exist anymore. We lost her, and I have to learn to live with that." Over the next weeks, I buried myself in work. I took every job that came into the shop, tables, chairs, bookcases, wardrobes. Keeping my hands busy was the only way to keep my mind from drowning in painful memories or what-ifs. My neighbors, Mr. Charles Jenkins and his wife Mary, started worrying about me. They'd known us since Emily was small and had become like family to us, especially after Rose died. "Mike, you haven't left that shop in weeks," Mr. Jenkins said one June afternoon, peeking through the door. "Mary's worried. She says you barely eat." "I'm fine, Charles. I just have a lot of work," I answered without looking up from the tabletop I was sanding. "And Emily? How's she adjusting to married life?" The question hit me like a punch, but I kept my composure. Emily is living her new life. She doesn't need her old father. Mr. Jenkins, a wise man of 70, walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Mike, I raised 4 kids, and I'll tell you something I learned. Sometimes kids need to get lost to find their way back home. Not this time, Charles. This time, she's gone for good. By the end of June, I decided to do something I'd been postponing for years: travel. Rose had always dreamed of seeing the New England coast, Bar Harbor, and the small towns of Maine. We never had the money or time. We always prioritized Emily's expenses. I closed the shop for a week and drove off in my old pickup. It was my first trip for pleasure in more than 20 years. I walked along the beaches, visited little museums, ate at local diners without worrying about a family budget. In Camden, sitting on a bench overlooking the Atlantic, I realized something important. For the first time in decades, I was making decisions only for myself. I didn't have to consider Emily's schedule, needs, whims, or emergencies. It was a bittersweet freedom, but freedom all the same. When I got home, I found 3 messages on my answering machine. None from Emily. 2 were from potential clients, and 1 was from my brother Anthony, who lives in Richmond, Virginia, and calls now and then to keep in touch. "Mikey," his recorded voice said, "I heard from the neighbors that Emily got married. Why didn't you tell me? I would have come to the wedding. Call me when you can. I want to know how my favorite niece is." I didn't call back. I didn't have the strength to explain that his favorite niece had decided the Turners weren't worthy of her new life among the elite. During July and August, I built a routine that helped me stay sane. I woke up at 6, had breakfast while watching the news, worked in the shop until 2, ate lunch with the Jenkinses when they invited me, and in the evenings I read books I'd bought long ago but never found time to open. On weekends I explored nearby towns in my truck, always looking for places Rose and I had never visited. It was like reclaiming all those years I'd lived only for Emily. In early September, I got an unexpected call from Jack Morris, a second cousin I hadn't seen in years. "Mike, how are you? I heard Emily got married. Why weren't we invited? I thought there must be some mistake." "No mistake, Jack. Emily decided she only wanted certain people at her wedding." "What do you mean, certain people? We're family." "Apparently, we're not the kind of family she considers appropriate anymore." Jack went quiet for a moment. "Mike, are you okay? You sound different." "I'm learning to be okay, Jack. For the first time in years, I'm learning to live for myself." That conversation made me realize something important. Emily hadn't just rejected me. She had cut off our entire extended family, all the simple, hard-working people in our circle. She pruned us like dry branches from a tree she wanted to grow in another direction, and I had finally accepted that choice. October arrived with the first cold winds of fall, and I had found a sort of peace in my new routine. My shop was busier than ever. I had a wait list of customers who appreciated my craftsmanship, and at night I slept without worrying whether Emily might need something. That's when the first rumors about trouble in Emily's marriage reached me. I didn't go looking for them. They just traveled through that invisible web of neighborhood talk. The first sign came from Mrs. Caroline Vance, who owned the bakery where I bought bread every morning. Caroline was the kind of woman who knew everything about everyone within a few miles. "Mike," she said while wrapping my usual rolls, "have you heard from Emily lately?" "No, Caroline. Emily's very busy with her new life," I answered, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Well, my niece Rachel works as a server at the Plaza's restaurant, where your daughter's wedding was." Carolyn leaned in, lowering her voice like she was sharing a state secret. She's seen Emily eating lunch alone several times. Says she looks worried, different from how she looked on her wedding day. I pretended not to care, but that information hovered over me all day. No matter how much I tried to convince myself, Emily wasn't my responsibility. 26 years of fatherly instinct don't disappear overnight. A week later, while I was repairing a door at the Hernandez home down the block, I overheard another conversation that unsettled me. Mrs. Hernandez was chatting with her neighbor in the yard, and I couldn't help hearing from where I was working. "Did you hear about Mike Turner's new son-in-law?" one woman said. "The rich kid who married Emily? What about him?" "Turns out Jason Montgomery lost his job at the family company a month ago. Apparently he had issues with Andrew, his own father. My sister-in-law works at the bank where they keep their accounts, and she says they've been pulling money constantly." My hammer froze in midair. Emily lived fully dependent on the Montgomery money. If Jason had lost his position in the family business, that meant serious problems for their lifestyle. I finished the job in silence and went home with that information spinning in my head. Part of me felt a bitter satisfaction, knowing the perfect family Emily chose over me wasn't as solid as it looked. But another part, the part that remained a father despite everything, worried about what this meant for her. In November, the rumors got more specific and more disturbing. Mr. Jenkins, who stayed in touch with several shop owners downtown, came to my shop with fresh news. "Mike, I don't know if you want to hear this. Tell me, Charles, nothing can surprise me now. I've heard Jason Montgomery has been spending his nights at bars and casinos. Apparently, since he lost the job, he's been drinking and gambling. My friend Ray, who owns the bar near the financial district, says he's seen him there many nights, always alone, spending money like it isn't his." The news hit me in an unexpected way. Emily had traded her father for a family that turned out to be a facade. She'd chosen financial security over unconditional love, and now that security was collapsing. "And Emily?" I asked, immediately regretting showing interest. "From what I hear, she doesn't know. Jason hides his problems. She's still living for appearances while he burns through what's left of his inheritance." Over the next weeks, I tried to stay busy, but the rumors kept trickling in like a leaky roof. Emily had been seen arguing with Jason in public. The Montgomerys had stopped inviting them to social events. Their luxury apartment was up for sale. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emily had rejected the stability and genuine love I represented for the illusion of joining a higher social class, only to discover that class was as fragile as a house of cards. One day in December, while eating lunch at my usual diner, I overheard the most revealing conversation yet. At the table next to me were two men in suits who clearly knew the Montgomery situation. "What Andrew Montgomery did is a scandal," one said, "firing his own son from the family firm, but it was necessary. Jason had been moving funds to cover his gambling debts. And Jason's wife? That girl from a modest family? Emily, I think. Poor thing has no idea what's coming. When Andrew finds out how much Jason took, he won't just cut him off, he'll probably sue, and she'll be caught in the middle." I finished my lunch mechanically, processing the information. Emily, who chose the Montgomerys' supposed security over her father's love, was about to learn she'd bet on the wrong horse. But the most important thing was this. For the first time in months, that news didn't wake an immediate urge to rescue her. Emily had made her choice. She'd been clear about who she considered her real family, and I had learned to respect that decision. Whatever was about to happen in Emily's life, she would have to face it with support from her real family, the Montgomerys. Wednesday, January 15th, 2025, my quiet life was interrupted by a call I didn't expect. It was 3 p.m., and I was varnishing a dresser when my cell phone rang. The number wasn't in my contacts, but something made me answer. "Michael Turner?" a woman asked, a voice I didn't recognize right away. "Yes, this is Mike. Who's calling?" "I'm Sophie Daniels, Emily's old college friend. I came to your house a few times when we were students. Don't know if you remember me?" I vaguely remembered her, a friendly brunette who'd been close to Emily during business school. "Of course, Sophie. How are you? What's going on?" "Mike, I'm calling because I think you should know what happened yesterday with Emily." Her voice sounded uncomfortable, like she wasn't sure how to say it. My stomach tightened immediately. "What happened?" "Emily came home early from the spa, where she works now as a receptionist. Sophie paused. Yes, Mike, Emily is working. The Montgomerys cut off all support 2 months ago when they found out what Jason had been doing. That surprised me. Emily, who had never really worked, who looked down on manual labor, was now forced to earn a living. And yesterday? I asked, though part of me didn't want to hear the answer. She found Jason in bed with her best friend, Christina Reed, in their own home, Mike, on the bed they shared as a married couple. Silence stretched between us. No matter what Emily had done to me, no matter how she had humiliated and excluded me, she was still the girl I'd raised, and knowing she was hurting stirred complicated feelings. Sophie, why are you telling me this? Emily made it clear I'm not part of her life. Because I'm worried about her, Mike. After she caught them, she went crazy, screaming, throwing things. But the worst part was his reaction. He told her she was never enough for him, that he'd only married because of pressure from his parents, and that Christina gave him what Emily couldn't. I closed my eyes, imagining the pain Emily must have felt in that moment. No one deserves to hear that from the person who's supposed to love them. And then? Jason left that same night with Christina. He left a note telling Emily she could keep what was left. But Mike, there's almost nothing. They'd been living off the jewelry Emily sold and her spa salary. The apartment is mortgaged. They're in debt everywhere. And the Montgomerys? Her in-laws? Sophie sighed deeply. That's the cruel part. When Emily went to Andrew and Patricia for help, they blamed her for not keeping Jason interested. Patricia told her, word for word, that a wife who can't keep her husband clearly doesn't belong in their family. That filled me with a rage I hadn't felt in months. The same people Emily chose over me, the ones she considered superior and more worthy of her love, abandoned her in the hardest moment of her life. Patricia told her she's no longer welcome at their home, that the Montgomery name has to stay clean of scandal, and that Emily should figure things out on her own. Andrew even hinted that if Emily had come from a better family, she would have known how to handle it. Better family, I repeated, the irony cutting like a blade. Yes, Mike. The same people Emily called her real family threw her out like a stranger. And the worst part is, Emily seems to accept that it's all her fault. I stayed silent for several minutes, taking it all in. Emily had lost her husband, her home, her financial stability, and the family she chose over her own father. She was completely alone, facing the consequences of decisions she had made with an arrogance she probably now regretted. Sophie, where is Emily now? She's still at the apartment, but only until the end of the month. After that, I don't know. She tried calling some distant relatives, but apparently most are upset because she excluded them from the wedding. She feels completely abandoned. And why are you telling me this? Does Emily know you called? No, she has no idea. I'm calling because, Mike, I've known Emily for years. I know she hurt you deeply, but I also know she still loves her dad deep down. She's just too proud to admit she was wrong. I hung up and stood there in my shop, surrounded by the familiar smell of wood and varnish, trying to process everything I had heard. Emily was going through exactly what I had predicted. The Montgomerys had used her and tossed her aside as soon as she stopped being useful. But the most important thing was this. After 8 months of mourning, rebuilding, and learning to live without Emily, was I willing to open the door again to someone who had hurt me so deeply? The answer came to me with crystal clarity. Not yet. Saturday, February 22nd, 2025, exactly 6 months after Emily's wedding, my life changed again in an unexpected way. It was 9 at night, and I was finishing dinner and watching the news when I heard desperate knocks on my front door. At first I thought it might be Mr. Jenkins with an emergency, but these knocks felt different, more urgent, more emotional. I got up from the couch and walked toward the door, but before opening it, something made me peek through the living room window. There was Emily. My daughter was standing under the dim streetlight, 2 big suitcases at her feet, tears running down her cheeks. She wore clothes I didn't recognize, simpler and cheaper than she'd worn in recent years. Her hair, once perfectly styled, was messy and dull. The knocking continued, now with her broken voice. "Dad, please, open the door. It's me, Emily. Dad, I need to talk to you." I stayed still, watching her through the glass. For months I had imagined this moment. I'd pictured Emily coming back, asking for forgiveness, admitting her mistakes. But now that it was really happening, I didn't feel the joy I expected. Instead, I felt a strange mix of sadness, contained anger, and, above all, absolute clarity about what I had to do. "Dad, I know you're there. I saw the lights on. Please just give me a chance to explain." Her voice sounded desperate, broken. "I was wrong, Dad. I was wrong about everything." I took a deep breath and opened the door, but kept my body blocking the entrance. Emily met my eyes, and for a moment we were silent, studying each other like two strangers who once knew each other intimately. "Hi, Emily," I said calmly, without much emotion. "Dad," she sobbed, trying to move in for a hug, but I didn't move. "Dad, everything fell apart. Jason cheated on me. The Montgomerys kicked me out. I lost my home. I lost everything. I have nowhere to go." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied with the same calm tone. "It must be very hard for you." Emily looked confused by my neutral voice. She probably expected me to rush to comfort her, to take her in with open arms like the desperate father I'd been for decades. "Dad, can I come in? It's cold out here, and I need to talk to you. I need to apologize properly." "Emily, 8 months ago you told me clearly I wasn't part of your real family. You excluded me from the most important day of your life because you thought I was too simple, too embarrassing for your new social circle." I kept my voice even, without showing pain or anger. "Why do you think things are different now?" "Because I realized I was wrong," she cried. "Because I understand you were the only one who loved me without conditions. The Montgomerys used me and tossed me aside when I wasn't useful anymore. You're my dad, the only dad I have. You're right, Emily. I'm your biological dad. That will never change." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her tears. "But being a biological dad and being family are different things. You taught me that yourself." "Don't say that. You're my family. You always were. I was confused. Emily tried again to come closer, but I stood firm. "Emily, when you decided I didn't deserve to be at your wedding, when you said you invited only your real family, when you made me feel ashamed of being your father for years, you made a final decision. You chose who mattered in your life, and I wasn't on that list. I was young. I was stupid. I was influenced by Jason and his parents," she pleaded. "People make mistakes, Dad. Can't you forgive me? Can't you give me another chance?" I looked at her for a long moment. This 26-year-old woman had been the center of my world for so long. Part of me wanted to give in, to hug her and say everything would be okay, that we could rebuild our relationship. But another part, the part that had learned self-respect in these months alone, knew this wasn't love. It was desperation. "Emily, for 6 months you were married, living your new life with your real family. In all that time you never called me, never checked on me, never thought to include me in your happiness." I paused, letting the words land. "Only now that you've lost everything, now that you're alone, you remember you have a dad." "That's not true." "Of course it is, Emily. If Jason hadn't cheated, if the Montgomerys hadn't kicked you out, if your perfect life were still intact, would you be here asking for forgiveness? Would you have come to tell me you missed me, or that you made a mistake?" Her silence said more than any words. Then, for the first time in our conversation, I smiled. Not a cruel or vengeful smile, just a sad but resolved one. "Emily, when you were 5 and fell off your bike, you ran to me crying so I'd comfort you. When you were 15 and your friends made fun of your dress at a party, you came home looking for my hug. For 21 years, every time the world hurt you, I was there to pick you up. But 8 months ago, when you had the chance to show me that I mattered too, you chose differently." "Dad, please." "No, Emily. Not this time." With those words, I closed the door gently but firmly, leaving my daughter outside with her suitcases and her tears. For the first time in my life, I had told Emily no. After closing the door, I stood in the hallway for several minutes, listening to her sobs on the other side. I could hear her broken voice calling me, begging me to reconsider, promising she had changed, that she'd do anything to regain my trust. But for the first time in 26 years, I didn't run to comfort her. I slowly walked to the window and peeked through the curtain. Emily was still there, sitting on the step by my door, her head in her hands. Her suitcases sat beside her like silent witnesses to her desperation. Every few minutes she looked up at my door, as if waiting for me to change my mind and come rescue her. A clear image flashed in my mind. Emily at 8, after a nightmare, running barefoot down the hall to my room. "Daddy," she had said then, "I was scared, but I knew if I came to you, you'd be here to protect me." When did I stop being her safe place and become her shame? I sat in my favorite chair, the same one where Rose and I used to plan our family's future, and let the memories play. I remembered all the nights I worked late at the shop to pay for Emily's extra English classes, the weekends I gave up rest to drive her to birthday parties, the times I ate less so she could have the brand name shoes she wanted. But I also remembered the early signs of what came later, how Emily became embarrassed by my pickup truck when I drove her to college, how she stopped inviting friends over because our home decor looked outdated to her, the times she asked me not to pick her up from certain events because her new crowd might see me. There were signs, many signs, I ignored, because I refused to accept that my little princess was becoming a stranger. Emily stayed outside for nearly an hour. I saw her pace, make a phone call, then sit back down. At one point she came to the door again and knocked more softly, almost shyly. "Dad, I know you can hear me. I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately. I'm just asking for a chance to tell you what really happened. Please give me 5 minutes." Her voice sounded different now, less desperate but more cracked. It was the voice of someone finally beginning to understand the real consequences of her choices. But I didn't move from my chair. I thought about Rose, what she would have done. Rose, who died 3 years ago without seeing her only daughter's wedding because Emily chose to exclude everything our family represented. Rose, who in her final days made me promise I would always love Emily, but never allow her to disrespect me. Madharutar. Mike, Rose had told me from her hospital bed, real love has boundaries. If you let Emily treat you badly, you're not teaching her to value genuine love. Promise me that if our daughter ever hurts you deeply, you'll have the courage to stand up for yourself. Sitting in the dim light of my living room, I finally understood what Rose meant. Around 11 that night, I heard an engine. I peeked again and saw Emily had called a taxi. I watched her load her suitcases, pausing one last time to look toward my window. For a few seconds, our eyes met through the glass. She raised a hand, half farewell, half one last plea. I didn't respond. The taxi drove away, taking Emily to a destination I didn't know, and for the first time in months I felt completely at peace with the decision involving my daughter. Over the next few days, I set a strict routine to stay busy and keep guilt from drowning me. I woke up early, worked hard in the shop, had lunch with the Jenkinses when they invited me, and in the evenings I read or watched TV, refusing to let my mind drift to Emily. But the neighbors' reactions came fast. Tuesday morning at the market, Mrs. Mercedes Reed, a 75-year-old who'd known our family for decades, approached me with a worried look. "Mike, I heard Emily came Saturday night and you didn't let her in. Is that true?" "It's true, Mercedes. But she's your daughter. No matter what she did, she's your blood. How could you leave her outside?" "Mercedes, Emily decided months ago I wasn't good enough for her life. I respect that decision, and I expect her to respect mine." The older woman looked at me with a mix of disapproval and confusion. "Parents forgive, Mike. That's what we do." Parents also deserve respect, Mercedes. And when all respect is gone, forgiveness must be earned, not assumed. That conversation repeated in different forms all week. Some neighbors supported me, especially those who had seen how Emily treated me in recent years. Others criticized me hard, saying I'd been too harsh. But interestingly, none of those opinions made me doubt. For the first time in my adult life, I had put my own feelings and dignity above my role as a rescue parent, and that felt as liberating as it was scary. The next 3 weeks after Emily's visit went by with a calm I hadn't felt in years. In the mornings, I woke without the anxiety that had followed me for months, wondering if Emily was okay, if she needed me, if there was a crisis requiring my help. Now, I simply got up, made coffee, and started my day focused on my responsibilities and well-being. The first clue about what Emily was facing came from Jack Morris, my second cousin, who called one Wednesday night with troubling news. "Mike, Emily reached out a few days ago," he said bluntly. "She was looking for a place to stay for a bit." "And what did you tell her?" I asked, already guessing the answer. "I told her I couldn't help, not just to stand with you, but honestly, after the way she treated all of us around her wedding, cutting us off like we were unwanted, we don't owe her a rescue now that things are hard." Jack paused, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. "She asked to borrow money, Mike. I explained my pension barely covers my bills, but she kept pushing, saying we're family and family helps. Can you believe the hypocrisy? When things were good, we weren't family enough for her wedding, but now that she's desperate, suddenly we are." That confirmed what I suspected. Emily was doing to the rest of the family what she'd done to me, remembering us only when she needed something. A few days later, my brother Anthony called from Richmond, his tone a mix of worry and annoyance. "Mikey, Emily called me yesterday crying. She told me Jason left and that you shut the door on her. What's happening?" I explained everything, from the wedding exclusion to the recent visit. When I finished, Anthony sighed. "Mike, I get it. I remember when Emily came to Richmond 2 years ago for my birthday. She acted like a princess, criticized my house, my food. She even made comments about my work. Maria and I were hurt, but we thought it was a phase." "Did she ask you for help too?" I asked. "Yes. She wanted me to loan her money for a rental deposit. I told her she had to make things right with you first. I'm not helping someone who treated her own father that way." Anthony paused. "Besides, Mike, if you cave now, Emily will learn she can treat you however she wants because you'll always save her in the end." That conversation calmed me. I wasn't alone. The people who truly knew and valued me understood why I had acted as I did. By late March, rumors about Emily's situation were spreading more openly in the neighborhood. Caroline at the bakery told me Emily had gotten a job at a downtown cafe, making just a little more than minimum wage. "I saw her the other day serving tables," Carolyn said while packing my bread. "She looked different, thinner, in plain clothes, no fancy jewelry. When she saw me, she looked away. I think she felt ashamed." "Honest work should never shame anyone," I said. "That's something Emily should have learned years ago." Caroline nodded. "You're right, Mike. Although part of me feels sorry for her. Going from having everything to starting from zero must be hard." "Carolyn, she's not starting from zero because of bad luck. She's starting from zero because she traded a family who loved her unconditionally for people who valued her only for usefulness. Choices have consequences, and Emily is living hers." In April, Mr. Jenkins brought more detailed news. His nephew worked in the same building as the cafe and had been observing Emily for weeks. "Mike, according to Raoul, Emily's living in a boarding house near downtown. It's modest, nothing like the luxury apartment she had with Jason." Jenkins watched me carefully. "He also says she eats lunch alone every day, always with the same sad look." "Are you telling me this so I'll feel sorry and go rescue her?" I asked. No, Mike. I'm telling you because I think you have a right to know how your daughter is, even if you've chosen distance. He sat down in a chair in my shop. But I'll add something else. Raoul overheard Emily talking with her coworkers, and apparently she still blames everyone but herself. She blames Jason for cheating, the Montgomerys for abandoning her, and especially you for not helping when she needed you most. That last part was revealing. Emily still wasn't owning her choices. In her mind, we were all villains in her story, and she was the innocent victim. Does Emily know you're telling me this? No, and she doesn't need to. But Mike, I think you made the right call. A person who can't admit their mistakes can't really change. And Emily, from what I can see, isn't ready to accept that her own choices led her here. That night, eating alone in my kitchen, I reflected on everything I'd heard. Emily was living exactly the consequences I had predicted: loneliness, money trouble, and rejection from those she'd looked down on when she felt superior. But the most important thing was that I felt at peace with my decision not to rescue her this time. May 2025 brought an unexpected change to my routine. My carpentry business had grown a lot in these months of personal focus. I had more orders than I could handle, and for the first time in years, I considered hiring help to expand the shop. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Emily struggled to survive on precarious jobs, I was experiencing one of the most prosperous periods of my career. It was as if, by freeing myself from constant worry over her crises, I'd found the mental energy to grow. One Tuesday morning, while organizing tools, I got a surprise visit. Sophie Daniels, the college friend who'd called me months earlier, appeared in the doorway. Good morning, Mike. Got a few minutes? Of course, Sophie. Come in, have a seat. I poured her a glass of cold water. How have you been? Fine, thanks, but I'm not here about me. She looked uneasy, as if dealing with an internal conflict. I'm here about Emily. Sophie, if Emily sent you to plead for her, you can save your time. My decision is made. No, Mike, she doesn't know I'm here. In fact, if she knew, she might stop talking to me. Sophie sighed. I'm worried about the direction her life is taking, but I also think you need to know a few things. I leaned back, ready to listen. Emily lost the cafe job last week, Sophie said. Apparently, she had a big argument with the manager when he asked her to clean the bathrooms, and she yelled that she didn't get a college degree to clean. That didn't surprise me. Emily still believed certain jobs were beneath her, even though her situation had changed drastically. What now? She got a retail job at a clothing store, but the pay is even lower. Mike, I've seen her several times these past weeks, and she's bitter. Very bitter. Sophie paused, choosing her words. She talks constantly about how life has been unfair, how everyone betrayed her, but never, never does she admit her own choices got her here. And what does she say about me? That's what worries me, Mike. She tells anyone who'll listen that you're a cruel, resentful father, that you threw her out when she needed you most, that you'd rather play the victim than help your own daughter. Sophie met my eyes. Worst of all, she seems genuinely convinced she's the victim in all this. I sat in silence for a long minute. Not only had Emily learned nothing, she'd built a story where the rest of us were the villains. Why are you telling me this, Sophie? Because I wanted you to know you did the right thing. Her answer surprised me. Mike, I've known Emily 8 years. I've seen how she treats people who love her, including you. And after these months, I realize she isn't learning humility. She's learning resentment. Sophie stood and looked out the window. There's one more thing. Emily's been saying that when things get better, she'll make sure everyone who didn't help her will pay for it. She specifically includes you. What exactly does that mean? I don't know, Mike, but it doesn't sound like someone reflecting and growing. It sounds like someone planning some kind of payback when she gets the chance. After Sophie left, I worked in silence, but her words kept circling my mind. Emily wasn't using this experience to grow. She was feeding her resentment toward those who refused to save her from the results of her own decisions. That afternoon, while sanding a table, I thought about the person Emily had become. She'd always had a tendency to blame others, but I had chalked it up to youth and inexperience. Now I understood it was deeper. Emily honestly believed the world owed her, that she deserved certain things without earning them. A week later, Mr. Jenkins brought more troubling news. His nephew Raoul had heard Emily on the phone at the store, apparently with some lawyer. "Mike, I don't know the details, but Raoul caught words like parental abandonment and financial responsibility. Do you think Emily might consider legal action against you?" The thought disturbed me, not because I feared legal consequences. I had fulfilled every obligation as a father for 26 years. It disturbed me because it confirmed what Sophie warned me about. Emily wasn't seeking reconciliation or growth. She was looking for ways to force me to help her, even through the courts if needed. That night, for the first time in months, I sat down to write. I documented our history, and especially the events of recent years, dates, witnesses, specific circumstances. If Emily really planned to take me to court, I'd be ready to defend not just my actions, but my right to set healthy boundaries in my own life. As I wrote, a clear realization formed. I didn't regret closing the door that night. In fact, every new piece of information confirmed I'd done the right thing. Emily was 26, fully capable of working, supporting herself, and building an independent life. The fact that she preferred resentment and coercion over responsibility showed she wasn't ready for an adult, respectful relationship with me. And until that changed, my door would stay closed. August 2025 marked exactly a year since Emily had excluded me from her wedding and 6 months since I shut the door at my house. In that time, I'd gone through a personal transformation I never thought possible. My shop had become more successful than ever. I'd hired a young apprentice, David Martin, a 19-year-old eager to learn the trade. David reminded me of myself at that age, humble, hard-working, grateful for every chance. "Mr. Turner," David said one afternoon as we finished a furniture set for an important client, "my dad says you're the best carpenter around, but also the wisest. He says you learn to value yourself in a way few men of your generation do." His words filled me with pride, not because of the compliment, but because they confirmed what I'd started to feel. I'd finally learned the difference between loving someone and letting them abuse that love. The last direct news about Emily came from an unexpected source, my doctor, Dr. Frederick Rhodes. During a routine checkup, he mentioned he'd seen a young woman the previous month who turned out to be my daughter. "Mike, I wouldn't usually mention other patients, but Emily asked me to tell you something," he said while reviewing my lab results. "She came in for stress and anxiety. Apparently she's working 2 jobs to get by." "And what did she want you to tell me?" "That she's thinking of moving to Seattle, that she can't find work here that lets her live with dignity. She also asked me to tell you that if you change your mind about helping, she has until the end of the month before she decides." I listened as calmly as if he were reading the weather. "Doctor, did Emily seem different, more mature, more aware of her mistakes?" "Honestly, Mike, no. She talked a lot about how life has been unfair and very little about what she could do differently. She seemed to be waiting for someone else to solve her problems." That was the final confirmation I needed. Emily was still the same person, expecting others to rescue her instead of taking control of her life. September came with no news from Emily, which I took as a sign she'd probably moved to Seattle. Strangely, that uncertainty didn't make me anxious. I had learned to accept that Emily is an adult, free to make her choices and live with the consequences. One Sunday afternoon, while organizing tools in the shop, I found an old photo that had fallen behind my workbench. It was Emily at 12, smiling as she helped me varnish a small chair we'd made together for her room. For the first time in months, I looked at that picture without pain or crushing nostalgia. Instead, I felt a quiet gratitude for the good moments we shared, and a clear acceptance that the Emily in that photo no longer exists. I put the picture away in a drawer, not to forget her, but because I no longer needed to cling to a relationship that had ended. In October, I finally did something I had delayed for years, updated my will. For decades, Emily had been my only heir, but that needed to change. I visited my attorney, Richard Morgan, who had handled our family's legal matters for years. "Mike, are you sure about this?" he asked while reviewing my new instructions. "Disinheriting Emily completely is a very final step." "Richard, for 26 years, Emily was my absolute priority. I poured all my love, time, money, and energy into her. When she had the chance to show I mattered too, she chose to humiliate me, publicly." My voice stayed calm but firm. "Emily made her choices as an adult. Now I'm making mine." "And who will inherit your estate?" "Part to David, my apprentice. He's shown more respect and care in 6 months than Emily has in years. Part to charities that help parents abandoned by their adult children. The rest will go to cousins and nieces who kept caring for me despite Emily's contempt." Signing those papers was liberating. For the first time in my adult life, I was making decisions based on who truly valued me, not on one-sided family obligations. November brought a final sense of closure. 8 months had passed since my last encounter with Emily, and I had built a full, satisfying life without her. One afternoon, while having coffee in Mr. Jenkins's garden, my old friend said something that struck me deeply. "Mike, do you know what impresses me most about your year?" "What, Charles?" "That you learned to love yourself as much as you loved Emily. Very few parents manage that." He smiled. "For years I watched you sacrifice everything for her, even your dignity. Now I see a man who understands that real love includes self-love." Those words rang true because they captured exactly what I had learned. I discovered that loving someone doesn't mean letting them mistreat you. I learned that being a good parent doesn't mean you're endlessly available to save an adult child from the consequences of their choices. And most of all, I understood my worth doesn't depend on being needed by Emily. At the end of the year, looking back on everything I'd lived through, I realized something fundamental. Emily did me a favor when she excluded me from her wedding. She forced me to face a truth I'd avoided for years. Our relationship had become toxic and one-sided. Now I lived with a peace I hadn't felt in decades. I worked because I enjoyed it, not because I had to support an adult daughter. I made decisions with my own well-being in mind, not just Emily's needs. And I slept well, knowing I chose dignity over codependence. If Emily someday truly grows, if she comes to understand the harm she caused and is willing to build a relationship based on mutual respect, my heart would be open to that possibility. But until that day, if it ever comes, I'll keep living the full and satisfying life I built without her. Because I finally learned that sometimes saying no is the most loving act a parent can make. If you like this story, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.